Doug Ford has been underfunding our colleges and universities in Ontario, and he's unwilling to do anything to fix it. In 2019, Doug Ford cut tuition by 10% and then he froze the tuition. Generally speaking, that's a good thing. The problem is he didn't increase funding to colleges and universities to make up for the tuition cut. Meaning that these colleges and universities had roughly 10% less money to spend. And this is why since 2019, we have seen a massive flood of international students coming into Ontario to make up for that funding shortfall. And a government-commissioned panel even recommended that the province unfreezes tuition and raises student aid and increases operating grants to universities. But Doug doesn't want to do any of that. And the feds have recently announced a cap on international students, so Ontario's going to have to cut their amount by half. This was done in part to deal with the bad actors in the private college sector, which, by the way, a bunch of these colleges have been linked to Ford where their executives have made donations to Doug Ford, the party, and other candidates. These bad actors are funding Doug Ford and the Conservatives, which might be why Doug Ford is not willing to do anything about the situation. And the colleges aren't even asking for much. They said that a 10% increase in operating grants would be more than enough. But even universities are struggling, recently with Laurentian going bankrupt and Queen's talking about having to cut a bunch of its programs to just stay afloat. Doug Ford is not willing to make the hard decisions that are needed to govern. If you're going to cut tuition for domestic students, then you need to raise provincial funding for those universities. But tuition should also not be frozen for this long. Since Doug Ford cut tuition by 10% and froze them in place, inflation is up by over 16%. And yet colleges and universities have not been getting an increase that is equivalent to this. Doug Ford can't govern, either because he is incapable of doing so or he is unwilling to do so.